listen, he gave a great acronym, right? LTV. I almost couldn't follow along because I only know 26 letters of the alphabet. I don't know why. You guys will get that. You'll catch up. So, guys, we're going to continue having fun here. Again, my name is Errol. I'm your host, and I hope you have fun. As you may or may not know, I like to tell you a little bit about myself, just so that way you're more comfortable, right? And one of the things that I love is how everything is going plant-based, right? Have you guys noticed that? Like, everything now is plant-based. And so I have actually been a pescatarian and or plant-based for the last 7 years, but it's always fun when I discover new plant-based items and then can really learn, like, okay, what are they gonna call that? Do you guys know what they call fake noodles? Does anybody know? Impasta. Yeah, see, I told you, I'm here all week, guys. I'm here all week, don't worry. All right, so we're gonna continue to have fun, and we're gonna bring up our next panelist, our next segment. And so in helping me do that, don't forget, guys, remember, this is not graduation style. So when I announce the names, you can feel free to use those hands and applaud, okay? And so let's go ahead and get into our panelists. I do wanna thank our platinum sponsor, IHS Markit. I wanna thank them again. They did a great job, really valuable information. But right now, we're going to go ahead and talk about the dealership of tomorrow. And of course, the future of electric, because guess what? All dealers are all in for electric. And so for that, I'd like to welcome up Jonathan Caliglio and also Kevin Tynan, who is with Bloomberg. So gentlemen, come on up. Stage is yours. Enjoy.
Thank you, Errol. Thank you, Errol. So, Kevin, you're with Bloomberg Intelligence. You've looked at electric vehicles inside and out, the manufacturing, the sales. We're at 2% sales nationwide just on BEVs, heading to 4%. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, I mean, look, the driver is going to be the automakers. In my opinion, the government can offer tax credits. They can fund infrastructure, but at the end of the day, when automakers are actually seeing a path to profitability in the technology, that's where that tipping point will come. You know, we're not at 2% by accident. We're not at 80% truck by accident, right? We look at it, and I always layer transaction price over volume. So the largest segment in the US by volume is compact crossover. But when you layer in retail revenue, it's actually full-size pickup truck. And there's a reason for that, right? So revenue contribution, profit contribution, that's where automakers want to be. That's what's engineered and designed and marketed. So when you have the consumer getting a tax credit, you have the government funding infrastructure, and you have an automaker that's seeing an unprofitable platform, what do you get? You know, how many do they want to sell? And the answer is fewer than zero. So unless there's profitability, or unless the government steps in, which I don't think they will, sort of like in Europe, and says, if you don't do that, there's a financial penalty to that, we're going to get adoption at the rate that we're getting it, which is as the automakers want it to happen.
So it's basically an evolution into electric, not a giant overnight revolution.
Yeah, you're not going to miss it. I mean, it's going to be a slow walk. I mean, this whole conference is about it. Look, Tesla Model S is 2013 was that first year, and they just did in 2021 936,000 units globally, fewer than 400,000 in the US. So if you figure that there were profitability there, Toyota, General Motors, BMW, you name the brand, you can never convince me that it would take Toyota 8 years to get to 400,000 units EV in the US. It wouldn't even take 8 quarters. And we're seeing that in Europe a little bit, right? Where the debate I have with my European counterpart is, when does Volkswagen surpass Tesla in global BEV? And it might be this year, it might be next year. So what's taken Tesla 9-10 years to get to, Volkswagen will get there in 2 or 3.
Now, just to clarify for the folks here, 2 to 3 years, are we including plug-in hybrids, or are we just talking about pure BEVs?
I generally prefer to talk about just BEV, only because I believe in the drivetrain singularity at some point, right? Automakers aren't going to invest in multiple drivetrain technologies. Toyota has talked about doing that, and I understand, look, we have segments, we have drivetrain technology. One thing doesn't work for everyone, right? A minivan doesn't work for everyone, a sports car doesn't work for everyone. And I think we're in a period now where electric might work for some people, internal combustion works for a lot of people, maybe someday hydrogen is working for people. So I think we're in a transition where we'll have plug-in hybrids or just regular gasoline hybrids will work for a time, but you're not gonna invest in both, right? So efficiencies in internal combustion will still be happening, but ultimately there has to be a changeover to one technology or another.
Now you mentioned incentives, where there's really been a lot of take-up of BEVs in Europe and China. They're not only incenting customers toward BEVs, but they're also kind of disincentivizing ICE. So for example, in Norway, I think it's cheaper to buy a BEV because of all the subsidies in it, or rather the penalties on ICE. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, you pay taxes 95% or something like that. So yeah, I mean, and again, I don't think our government is of the mindset to do that just yet. Really, maybe it's considered picking a winner as far as technology and as far as specific companies. So I don't think we get there, but yeah, I mean, there's going to be motivation for the automakers to do it. The question is it natural or organic-ish like it is here in the US, or is it, diesel scandal in Europe and the government comes out and says, look, Volkswagen, you have no way forward with diesel in this, you have to change. And, they couldn't do anything else, right? We didn't want to buy diesel here for years, right? You want diesel, and we didn't. So Volkswagen kind of had to step to the forefront because of the scandal and lead on EV. I mean, the marketing is slightly different than that story, but that's essentially what happens.
So let's talk about the retail side of this. Going back forever in the automotive industry, there's been the franchise model. In most industries, if manufacturers or producers can get into a franchise model where they are controlling the intellectual property, where they're doing the marketing, and then they kind of farm out the assets and the operations to local business people, that's kind of what most industries want to do. In automotive, there seems to be a push on the direct sales. Now, you've looked into this a lot. Tell us about your findings on the franchise model.
I just don't think it's scalable, right? Even Tesla, if you're selling 300, 400,000 units a year, you can pick them up at the mall. You can send a flatbed to fix it in the driveway. But 3 million vehicles, and as your registered fleet starts to grow, it's just unmanageable. I do think that in a lot of ways, the process will have to improve at retail. I think, obviously, and this is not new, but consumers are knowledgeable. They know the numbers, they know the features, they know what they want. So getting through that process faster will be a benefit to the retailers, but at the end of the day, there's just no way. I mean, and ultimately, they're automakers, and I talk to consumers all day about this, even colleagues within Bloomberg who say, I hate the dealership experience, and I'm saying, well, you think it would be any better if you were buying directly from the factory, who is not in the business of selling things to you, right? They're in the business of manufacturing. Why would they be a better retailer than the retailers? So there's this little bit of misconception, and I think that the retail channel, the dealership has, probably an image issue more than anything, but I don't think that the auto industry can distribute and service and provide after sales for 17 million units a year direct. I just don't see how it's scalable.
I want to just flag an event tomorrow, Escalent. Is that when we're doing the Escalent thing, Jared? Yeah, okay. So we actually have a whole panel on do consumers want to buy from dealerships or do they want to buy direct? Escalent has done a whole bunch of research on that, and we'll get into that tomorrow. So you mentioned customer satisfaction. What we saw in the Escalent data is that young people, surprisingly, I mean, it just kind of goes against the stereotype, are far more bullish on the franchise model. Talk about CSI. Like, how do the best dealerships compare against the direct model.
Well, and here's the thing, right? This is the most dynamic time in the industry, and I've been doing this 25 years, and that includes the bankruptcy period in 2008, 2009. And I mean for the manufacturers and for the retailers. We've been 5 months in a row, average transaction prices above MSRP. In February, it was 1.2% above, industry-wide. And it seems unsustainable, and it very well may be, but I think that this is different in terms of units on the ground, days supply. I think this is an industry right now that can get to snugged up to MSRP for good, as long as the process is such that it's easier, right? I don't think we go back to 80, 90 days on the ground. You go to order books. I think if you have customers ordering exactly what they want and getting what they want, not only will they wait for it, they'll also pay sticker for it just to make the transaction easier. So, and then there's still all the other ancillary businesses for dealerships to take care of. So the idea of direct sales I don't think is manageable. It's not scalable, but I think you can get, starting from the manufacturer being supply and demand imbalance, you can keep transaction prices right at sticker. I mean, we do it everywhere else, right? I booked my flight, booked my hotel, I took a taxi here, I didn't haggle anything. I just paid what they asked and I got where I was going.
One of the fallacies that we hear in this debate, it comes up in the media from time to time, is the idea that because electric vehicles are different, that they need to be sold differently. But we've looked at the research, and is there something to that or not?
Well, here's the thing, and I would call out Tesla specifically on this, because to me they feel more like a device maker, right? They call themselves, and they're valued like a technology company, which I think is legitimate. Only maybe not the valuation, but legitimate in that it's really not about the driver or the ownership experience. Elon Musk feels like any input into a vehicle is in error. The vehicle should know and do what it's supposed to do without you. And as enthusiasts, right, I can't wrap my mind around. I think every other automaker still understands that there's a lot about this product that is about your individuality and about your freedom and makes a statement, and I don't think we get away from that. So for a company like Tesla, which has been really unchallenged, they can stamp out devices. There's plenty of people, my wife is one of them, who don't really care, right? Is it safe? Is it efficient? Does it get me from here to there? Don't really care what it looks like or what it costs, apparently. So, so there's those people, but I think the industry as a whole, it doesn't necessarily work for. So there will always be a place for automakers to do design and to do different segments. It's just the way this industry has always been, and I don't think it changes. So at the end of the day, to me, you have a device maker, but it's not that different. It's a different drivetrain. It's still a vehicle. It still serves the purpose of all the things that it does. You have maybe one or two automakers that are saying your car is to transportation as your cell phone is to making calls. It's not really what it's about anymore, but I think that all the other automakers are saying, no, it's about what it used to be about.
Service. Where do you see that going in EVs? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, some interesting data yesterday. I sat in on a panel, and I got to track down that person, was saying that in the first 3 years, service and warranty on electric vehicles is actually more than internal combustion, which I think is, I don't know if it's counterintuitive, but I don't think it's what the public understands or believes at this point. So again, and if anything, I would say that when you have nascent automakers with no scale, they don't have that after-sales scale either. And I think as those companies, Tesla included, as they try to get to 3 million units a year, they need franchises. They need people that not only know the product and can sell it, but can service it as well, right? You're gonna need, there's consumable parts on every vehicle regardless of the drivetrain.
So you talked about the problems with scale for selling, but the scaling service is even much harder. So Tesla had that huge recall. Back of the envelope, it doesn't even appear that their service network can absorb that work.
Well, their service business is unprofitable at the gross line, at the gross margin line. So, yeah, I mean, you just can't.
Throw in a million recalls on top of that.
You're right. Yeah. So it just doesn't make sense. It all gets blown away by all the other things that they say and do, and the valuation and things like that. But that business doesn't make sense for them at scale, and I think they know that. I think they know that it's just not possible to if their goal is 20 million units globally per year, it's just not possible to do that in a direct sales and after sales and service model.
So they're losing money on sales. That sounds like a great investment to invest in a bunch of service centers that lose money.
Yeah, well, they don't have service centers, right? So it's all mobile, and it's all,
Sort of.
And the other thing too is you got to remember that they're banking on, and I think why the perception is there that it's a better way to do things is that they'll lose money on it, but it's over-the-air updates, right? It's simple. Oh, we can just, and a lot of people in dealerships that I talk to are a little bit nervous about the over-the-air update. Like, hey, if we can't get it in and up on a lift and get the wheels off, where are we making gross? And there'll be plenty of work. And look, and that's even before you consider that the fleet, the existing registered fleet of internal combustion vehicles is going to be here for a long time, right? It's something like 300 million registered vehicles that average 12 years. So what I tell
the momentum of that going through the timeline.
Well, what I tell people is that, look, for every month that we sell X, 1.5 million units in the US and 2% of them are EV, that means 98% of them are internal combustion, right? Every month. And they're going to live for 12 years at an average.
So the previous panel talked about friction in the sales process. Can you talk about friction in the ownership of an EV? They're not for everybody. They're great cars. They're a heck of a lot better than they were 10 years ago. But talk about what that looks like for the average consumer.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're going to have charging issues, and the charging infrastructure we have now is underutilized. So the perception is that as battery technology advances and we get more range, that will go away. And really what I've been saying is, look, going back to my original point, that when this technology is profitable for a manufacturer, it will be amazing. Range anxiety will be marketed out of existence, right? Because they're vehicles that they want to sell, that they can sell profitably. So the idea of, look, it reminds me of when Ford went aluminum with F-150, right? General Motors comes out and slams like, to get it fixed, it's not durable, and then because they're working on theirs and haven't released it yet, right? But then once it's out, it's the greatest thing also. So, the issues will always be there because of recharge time and range. And I actually do this, but I'll time myself. In New Jersey, we can't pump our own gas. So from the apron to the apron, I'm 2 minutes and 40 seconds out the door. So there's people that will say, well, why would I spend even 20 minutes for 80% of my charge? And I go, okay, well, so next time you fill up for 3 minutes and sit there for an extra 27 and see what that feels like. People will lose their minds.
But those frictions will decline over time, right? As there's more infrastructure, as the batteries change, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and again, look, I also think you can put infrastructure everywhere and it's not a hurdle. But until the automakers want to sell those vehicles, you're going to get what we have, which is 2%. So I don't look at infrastructure as something that's keeping us at 2%. It will reduce friction, but just like gasoline prices spiking now, people say oh man, what happens to this 80% truck mix? And I go, well, we're going to buy smaller trucks at most. We don't make cars anymore, right? There's a couple of fire breathers left: Mustang, Camaro, Corvette, Charger, Challenger, and that's basically it from the domestic manufacturers. We don't build them. You can't sell them. They don't exist. So the consumer will adapt, but I think that the idea will be that it will be just marketed out of. It will work for some people, and that'll be fine. And maybe it doesn't ever work for everybody.
So one of the things, just to finish up, one of the things that when you talk to an EV skeptic, I find that there are a lot of conversation.
Are you calling me an EV skeptic?
No, I'm not. I'm saying there, but everywhere you go, you're going to find somebody, no, I don't believe in the EVs. And I find that there are a lot of conversation-ending assertions that just end the conversation, right? So, the grid can never handle the current demanded by all the cars. Or my favorite is, there's not enough tungsten in the solar system to put in the batteries to charge the cars. So, like, have you looked into that? I mean, it's because we wanted to know the answers to those questions. Curious to get your take.
Well, it's interesting. I talk to a lot of companies up and down the supply chain, specifically on the materials side. And one interesting thing that I've been finding a lot is basically companies are telling me, right, we'll get an announcement, we're going to be 50% EV by X date or 100% EV by X date. And a lot of the materials, and this is lithium and cobalt and things like that, tell me like, hey, Kev, those contracts aren't even signed. So, and these lithium companies, for example, are saying like, we know all the other companies, right? We know the market. So, it's sort of like at the beginning of the season, everybody's team is going to win the Super Bowl. It's like, yeah, everybody's saying all these things and putting projections out there, and the contracts don't exist yet. So even if you look at a 3 to 5 year lead time on those, you're saying like, I'm not sure how they're realistically going to get there. But when you look at Tesla's $1 trillion valuation, you understand why automakers are doing it, right? They've said, Tesla over the years has said a lot of things that either haven't happened or happened way later than they say they're going to happen, and it's $1 trillion, not anymore, but it was $1 trillion company. So I think you're getting a lot of that of, hey, let's push this out. We got a really long runway, and by this date, when, I personally, I love when people go, in 2030, EV penetration is going to be 50%, and I go, yeah, I'll be retired, I don't care.
Now, the valuations of some of those companies are not as manufactured companies. They're being valued with multiples of early stage tech companies.
Yeah, and I feel like that is ending, right? I think there was one company, Tesla, that got that consideration, and now the due diligence on the actual, as an analyst, you look at it and it makes no sense. And Tesla really unchallenged for all those years, I hate to say got away with a lot in terms of valuation, but they did. And the Lucids of the world and the Rivians just aren't doing that, right? There's a production cut or a production delay, and the market is reacting to that. Where, when Tesla started out, the idea was the total addressable market was the world. It was 100 million vehicles globally. And hey, if nobody else is doing that, that means Tesla has free reign to take as much market share as they want. And what I tell people is that, look, it's not an inability of other automakers to do what Tesla does. It's an inactivity. Saying like, well, why would I sell 1 million vehicles a year unprofitably when I'm selling 10 million a year profitably? And so why would I fight for those 1 million unprofitable units? Now maybe it becomes 5 million and it's closer to profitability. Like, okay, we'll play along. Or you have the German government saying like, hey, Volkswagen, you have to do this, right? And they'll say, okay, we'll play along for those. So now maybe is that market 20 million and now you get more players playing. But it's not, like I said, it's not going to sneak up on anybody. And it's not happening randomly. It's happening because the large automakers are pushing in that direction for their own reasons.
Hydrogen. What's your take? I mean, early on, there was debate between battery. Has a little bit of traction in Japan. Where do you think it's going to come down?
I'm going to sound like a maniac. I think that's actually a good answer. I think hydrogen is a good solution longest term. And the other thing is this, right? I always found this interesting is that Toyota, how they believe in hydrogen to me is very interesting, right? Toyota led with Prius in the 90s, never really put a plug on it, never believed, and I still don't think they do believe in electrification. Now they've softened and they talk a lot about, maybe there's multiple technologies and there's a place for internal combustion, there's a place for electric, there's a place ultimately for hydrogen. If carbon footprint reduction is really the goal, we need all these things, is what they've said. And I'm saying like, Toyota's either really smart or really dumb, right? Like, because
I don't think they're really dumb.
right,
Yeah.
and that's my thing is like, well, it's Toyota, so here's Toyota not really believing in electrification, and I don't think there's enough attention given to that. Obviously, there's issues with hydrogen infrastructure, the cost, the materials, the whole thing, but just the fact that Toyota hasn't really committed or doesn't believe wholeheartedly in electrification, I think is a super interesting thing.
One final question. I don't know if you looked into this at all, but Apple. I want to say that their average inventory is something like 16 days. If they were to go into the automotive market, could they achieve something like that realistically?
Well, I mean, wearing my analyst hat, I would say, why would they want to, right? They're making tech margins, and now you're going to, every automaker is like, it's the glory days of 10% operating margin. So I don't know why they would. I think that there's this push to put technology and to be represented in the vehicle. And again, I think this goes back to the idea of devices, right? About your car not necessarily being about what cars used to be about, but about being devices. And there will be companies that will get involved in that. It's, a couple months ago I was here for CES, and Sony is showing their electric car. But that could be about licensing the technology. I'm not sure a tech company or why a tech company would want to become a metal bender. Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
One final question. So 2017, 2018, everybody was talking about ACEs, autonomous, connected, shared, electric. At that point, there was a lot more interest in autonomous, and electric was kind of in the background. 4 years later, it's totally flip-flopped. Where are we on autonomous?
Yeah, so the thing with autonomous was, if you remember, mid-2000, right, and I remember 2005 was about the time I came out and said, look, this business model for our domestic manufacturers is unsustainable. These companies are essentially bankrupt, right? And then it was 5 years later where they actually were. So that investment, automotive technology in general, really started to dry up around that, right, mid-decade. And then you go through the cost rationalization of bankruptcies, and then operating profit starts to come back, 2010, 2011, 2012, right? All this investment comes. And I think that period was about the hardware, right? Now it's like, all right, let's go back and put all the hardware in the vehicles. And so it looked really promising. And then we get to the point where it's like, okay, we can onboard all this data, right? Like I said, you come here for SEMA or CES, and it's 800 LiDAR companies that are about getting data into the vehicle, and you're going, okay, now it's about software. What do you do with the data? And that's what hasn't been figured out yet. So I think we're at this point where we have all the cameras and sensors and LiDAR and radar and whatever else to get data onto the vehicle, but we don't know what to do with it yet. And I'm not sure, I mean, I love to drive, so I don't even use cruise control, but I'm not sure there's a model where the machine is a better driver in all situations, all times of day, all environments than the human. And if it is, I worry, because then what are we left to do? Then what isn't it better than us at?
99% of the time is great, but 1% of the time is where all the problems happen with humans.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at it, hey, look, it goes 75 miles an hour in the middle lane on a sunny day from New Jersey to Florida, and I'm going, I can do that too, right? Like, do it in the snow and in the rain and in the dark and, with deer running in front of your vehicle. So I'm not sure even technologically that it's possible. I think we can, and we have made improvements in safety, right? A vehicle that can see 360 degrees for 300 meters, 24 hours a day is great, right? But I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to hand over, no steering wheel, no pedals.
Everyone, Kevin Tynan from Bloomberg, thank you.